Deep in the rugged hills of East Tennessee, where copper stills bubble beneath ancient hardwoods and the air smells faintly of mash, two of the most respected names in modern moonshining, Mark Ramsey and Digger Mains, found themselves caught up in a backwoods deal that turned sour faster than a batch of corn mash left out in the sun. The setup: a promising partnership. Mark and Digger, seasoned artisans of the shine and folk heroes to fans of Moonshiners, have long prided themselves on walking the fine line between tradition and trouble. While their operations skirt the edges of legality, the duo has often worked smarter, not riskier, employing old-time know-how and mountain wisdom to keep ahead of the law and stay one step clear of disaster. But as the show's latest season got underway, rumors began to swirl in the hills. The boys were getting involved with a newcomer, an out-of-towner named Travis "Twitch" McGraw, a fast-talking former NASCAR pit crew dropout with a slick mullet and even slicker smile. Twitch pitched them a deal too good to pass up. "He came up here with that silver tongue," Digger recalled, rubbing the bridge of his nose in frustration. "Promised us he had a connection to a private distillery in North Carolina looking to market a heritage moonshine line. Said they'd pay us triple market rate for exclusive runs." Mark, usually the more cautious of the pair, admitted to initial hesitation. "I don't like outsiders nosing around our mountains," but Twitch knew our lingo. Talked mash bills and thump cake pressures like he'd grown up in a holler. Thought maybe he was one of us. Flags in the mash. The plan was simple, or so it seemed. Twitch would provide ingredients and upfront cash. Mark and Digger would distill 3 batches using one of their off-grid locations. The shine would be labeled Wildfire Heritage, a brand Twitch claimed had already lined up major distribution in Charleston and Asheville. But as they began cooking, things started going off. The first sign came when the sugar Twitch delivered reeked of bleach. "Good mash doesn't smell like it came outta a janitor's closet," Diva said flatly. "I told Mark, something's wrong here." But Twitch brushed it off, said it was industrial grade. Mark chimed in. "That ain't a phrase you want to hear in moonshining. We ain't making antifreeze, we're making drinking liquor." Still, against their instincts, they ran the first batch. It turned out cloudy, with a bitter metallic aftertaste. Even their seasoned tongues, which could usually identify a bad run in one sip, were left puzzled. "I ain't never tasted anything like it," Mark admitted. "Tasted like rust and regret." Smoke in the Hollaby, the time the second batch was fermenting. Twitch's promises started to falter. Phone calls went unanswered. A check bounced. The supposed North Carolina distillery turned out to be a rented storage unit in Vestonia. Worse still, one of Digger's longtime contacts, a retired ABC agent turned informant, warned them Twitch might be under investigation for interstate alcohol trafficking. "You get a call from a friend of the law, you listen," Digger said, jaw tight. "We pulled the plug right then." But Twitch wasn't gone. The day they drained the mash and dismantled the still, he showed up, angry, armed, and wearing mirrored sunglasses that didn't quite hide the twitch in his left eye, the one that earned him his nickname. "EV was in the holler," Mark said. "Just packing up. Next thing we know, there he is, yelling that we owed him, that we'd breached a contract." According to Digger, Twitch had a piece on his hip, and his hand was resting on it too casually. "That ain't the kind of conversation we like to have," Diva said. "So I did what I do best. I stole him with talk while Mark grabbed the scattergun from the ATV Twitch, perhaps realizing he was now outnumbered, outgunned, and far from any place with reliable cell reception, eventually backed off, but not before issuing a threat. He said we'd be sorry," Mark recalled, shaking his head. "Said the folks he worked for weren't gonna be happy." The cleanup and the fallout the next few weeks were tense. The boys laid low, moving their operations to an undisclosed secondary location and double-checking all their routes for tails. Mark's nephew, JT, even ran license plate checks on anyone new seen in the vicinity. Meanwhile, the show's producers were kept in the loop. Though, as per Discovery Channel's long-standing policy, they remained hands-off unless legal lines were definitively crossed. "We didn't want this to become some scripted TV drama," Digger said. "This was real. Our lives, our livelihoods. Ain't nobody actin' when a guy's reachin' for a gun in the hills." By mid-season, Twitch had disappeared. Local talk said he skipped town after an argument with bikers over bad product in a Knoxville dive bar. One rumor even claimed he was seen boarding a Greyhound to Oklahoma City under the name "That boy was runnin' from more than just us," Mark muttered. "Hope he keeps runnin'." Back to basics in the aftermath, Mark and Digger took a hard look at their operation. The near disaster had left a bad taste in more ways than one. "We got caught up in the idea of expansion," Mark said. "But moonshine ain't about getting big. It's about getting it right. That's what our daddies taught us. That's what we forgot, just for a minute." The pair decided to scale back for the rest of the season, focusing instead on specialty small batch runs using heirloom corn and local fruit. They also reconnected with a few trusted, older contacts, folks who remembered when moonshine was currency, not commerce. As for the Wildfire Heritage label, that idea burned out like wet kindling. Lessons learned. Legend preserved. The Sketchy deal may have soared, but Mark and Digger walked away wiser. "We was lucky," Digger said, setting a copper coil on his workbench. "Coulda ended a lot worse. Coulda been jail. Coulda been a funeral." And Mark nodded. "But we're still here. Still cookin'. And as long as there's folks who want honest shine made by honest men, we'll keep on." In a world where fast money and false promises lurk behind every tree, it's men like Mark Ramsey and Digger Maines who remind us that the old ways, though slower, riskier, and harder, still hold the most truth. So the next time you pour a sip of shine under the stars, raise a jar to the ones who stayed true, even when a silver tongue tried to sell 'em snake oil. In the hollows of East Tennessee, trouble tends to sneak up like fog rolling over the ridge, quiet, cold, and hard to shake. For Mark Ramsey and Digger Maines, two of the most seasoned shiners in the Smoky Mountains, what started as an opportunity turned into a nightmare when a handshake deal with a slick-talking newcomer went sideways fast. The Setupit was early spring, that in-between season when the frost still lingers, but the air smells faintly of green. Mark and Digger had just wrapped up a successful winter run and were talking about taking it easy for a spell. But moonshining doesn't sleep, and neither do the folks who want a piece of the action. Enter JT, Slick Moreland, a flashy city type with a strong jaw, shiny boots, and a smile so wide it could catch rain. He came into their lives the way all bad news does, unexpected and too friendly. Claimed he had deep ties in Nashville and connections to distributors looking for authentic Appalachian product. Said he could triple their income if they partnered up on a new recipe: apple cinnamon shine with a smoky oak twist. Now Mark and Digger aren't greenhorns. They've seen more stills than Sunday mornings and can smell trouble from a county away. But this time, the dollar signs were big, and the curiosity about working with barrel-aged flavors got the better of them. "We figured it couldn't hurt to at least see what he was talking about," said Digger, sitting in his cluttered workshop, sipping a mason jar half full of clear. "We weren't born yesterday, but we ain't so old we can't try something new." The cook, they agreed to a trial run, small batch, tight controls, their location undisclosed. Slick brought in a couple barrels and some fancy wood chips, talking about mid-palate notes and finish warmth. Mark mostly rolled his eyes, but he was interested in the science behind aging shine quicker. Old boy had more words for a jar of liquor than I ever heard before, Mark said. But he had some good wood and his own barrels, so we figured, why not? The cook went smooth. The mash was sweet, the apple cinnamon subtle but present, and the smoky flavor from the toasted oak was just enough to make it distinct. It wasn't your grandpappy's shine, but it was good. They finished 3 barrels in a hidden spot up a mountain ridge they trusted. Slick promised he'd be back in 2 days to pick up samples and start phase 2 of distribution. That was the last time they saw him. The vanishing act. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. No calls, no word. Just an empty promise hanging in the air like smoke. At first, they thought maybe Slick got cold feet. Then they took a hike up to the stash spot, and their worst fear was confirmed. Gone. All 3 barrels. Tracks in the mud, a cigarette butt, and nothing else. Somebody made off with them, plain as day, Mark muttered, inspecting the deep tire marks where a truck had pulled in, and they knew exactly where to look. There was only one person who had that info.